The Myers-Briggs Type Indicator Test, or MBTI, is one of the most popular personality tests in the world. It is estimated that over 2 million people take the test each year, and it's not unique to a specific geographic, but is a global phenomenon. Created in the US in the mid-1900s, MBTI has stood the test of time, surviving close to a century with no end in sight. It is a personality indicator test that is not only popular in the US, but has influence in countries all over the globe, including Europe, Asia, Africa, and beyond. But what exactly is MBTI, and why is it so popular? Even with its popularity, why does the scientific community dislike it so much? Why do millions of people take the test each year, while videos about the typing system receive so much criticism? And despite all the hate and criticism, why is it not only surviving, but actually thriving? This video will be a deep dive into Myers-Briggs Type Indicator Test and explore many questions related to the topic. I will discuss the history of the MBTI system and why it was originally created. I will examine why MBTI has been rejected by the psychological and scientific community. I will explore the different branches of learning that it's inspired, and I will discuss why and how the test will continue to thrive over time. This video isn't meant to persuade you to think one way or another about the typing method, but instead to educate you on the MBTI typing system itself. This video will explain why the MBTI test will never die. Let's briefly go over what MBTI is, and if you're new to the topic, I'll use a few key terms that I'll explain more in detail later in the video. MBTI is a personality test indicator that sorts a person's cognitive preference into one of 16 results, commonly known as archetypes. Each result consists of 4 letters, and the 4 letters indicates a person's personality preference. Keep in mind that each letter has a specific meaning that's different from its dictionary definition, so don't fall prey to the minutiae of each word. The first letter, I or E, indicates whether a person is introverted or extroverted. The second letter, N or S, indicates whether a person is an intuitive or a sensor. The third letter, T or F, indicates whether a person is a thinking or feeling type. The fourth letter, J or P, represents whether a person is a judging or perceiver. When combined, these letters create combinations such as ISTJ, INTP, ESTJ, or ENTP. Each result being an example of archetype found in the Myers-Briggs system. The Myers-Briggs system works in dichotomies, meaning a person cannot be both an introvert and an extrovert, or both an intuitive or a sensor at the exact same time. I'll address the issue of dichotomies later in the video, including the concept of an ambivert, but for the sake of simplicity, accept that dichotomies is a non-negotiable rule in the Myers-Briggs system. Understanding the 4-letter code is as far as most casual fans go when exploring the MBTI system, which is often why it faces so much criticism. However, the MBTI system delves much deeper into psychology, and the 4-letter titles are just the tip of the iceberg. But before we get into the psychological foundation of the testing system, let's quickly go over how the Myers-Briggs system can be found in normal day-to-day life. People encounter the Myers-Briggs system through various channels, such as school, work, social media, friends, family, or just out of sheer curiosity. While the application of the test differ, ranging from workplace productivity to career alignment, or just pure entertainment, the core onboarding process remains the same. The process looks something similar to this. A person answers a series of questions ranging from 50 to 400 questions. The result of the test will categorize a person to an established archetype. The person will be presented with documentation describing ways in which they theoretically operate, and to learn more, the person should consult a person trained in explaining the results more in depth. Even with such a simple process, response to the test vary widely. Some people experience a eureka moment, finally feeling understood for the first time in their life. Others reject the test, believing that people are inherently different and can't be categorized or put in a box. Some people feel indifferent and just don't care. And then there are people who read the results and can't seem to relate. If the test is so popular and widely known, why are there so many mixed feelings, mixed emotions after taking the test? These mixed reactions can stem from various factors, such as inaccuracies in the test, misunderstanding of oneself when answering the questions, mood bias, and the most popular explanation, the test is inaccurate because it's pseudoscience, therefore it's not valid. Let's focus on the popular reaction for a moment. Is MBTI pseudoscience? The MBTI test is not widely accepted in the psychological and scientific community. The American Psychological Association, or the APA, advises caution due to concerns about its reliability and validity as a measure of personality. Criticism of the MBTI system includes limited independent scientific research not funded by the Myers-Briggs Foundation itself, its dichotomous framework, which doesn't align with the widely accepted spectrum-based view of personality in modern-day psychology, and the potential of self-fulfilling prophecies and subjective interpretation of results. These factors lead to MBTI being labeled pseudoscience, as it lacks empirical evidence to meet the standards of modern-day psychology. And just so we're aligned, empirical evidence is defined as information gathered through observation, experimentation, or measurement. It is based on real-world observation rather than theories or speculation. The current iteration of the Myers-Briggs system doesn't fulfill those requirements, and that's the reason why it's commonly referred to as pseudoscience, which, regardless of whether you're a fan of MBTI or a hater of the typing system, we all have to accept that the current iteration of MBTI does in fact fall in the category of pseudoscience. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the MBTI system is useless or ineffective, because there are sciences, such as chemistry, that is a derivative of the pseudoscience of alchemy, and a foundation of modern-day client-facing therapy is based off of Freudian psychology, research that is facing criticism today due to its lack of controlled experiments. Additionally, MBTI falls in a category of questions that can't be answered using the scientific method, alongside questions such as, what is the true nature of consciousness? Why do people have specific dreams? Do people actually have souls? Or what does it really mean to fall in love? And the reason why the scientific method can't answer these questions is because of factors such as subjectivity between personal experience, ethical limitation, meaning that there are boundaries that we ethically should not cross even for the sake of science, or accepting the sheer complexity of human behavior. The modern-day research method has no way to answer any of those questions definitively, which doesn't mean that the scientific method doesn't work. It just means that we're using the wrong formula to solve a specific equation. A simple analogy is that we're judging the validity of a fish by its ability to climb a tree. The MBTI system was never created to pass the research method, and it'll start making sense when I start going over why the MBTI system was originally created and how it has naturally evolved over time. To settle this lifelong debate, let's align on a few key topics. First, MBTI will not pass the scientific method currently accepted in psychology today. Second, MBTI lacks empirical evidence to support its validity. Third, MBTI falls in a category of pseudoscience. Fourth, MBTI was never intended to pass the scientific method. And lastly, pseudoscience has often laid the foundation for scientific advancement. Now that we've all vocally aligned on where MBTI falls in the category of science and psychology, let's move forward to explore its history, evolution, and its future. And there's no better place to start than where it began. The first version of MBTI was created in 1944 by the mother-daughter pairing of Catherine Crooks Briggs and Isabel Briggs Myers. The test was originally created to assess women entering the industrial workforce during World War II, as most men were drafted into the military. Prior to the war, women's occupations were typically limited to traditional female jobs, such as sewing or typing, and women were expected to leave the workforce once they were married or had children. All of this is just to say that men made up the majority of the American workforce at that time. With most men away fighting the war, women were needed in the workforce to help sustain the American economy during the labor shortage. And for additional context, the famous character of Rosie the Riveter was created in 1942 for many reasons, including promoting women to fill the critical role left by drafted men. It is also stated by one of her grandchild that the test was created to prevent future conflicts. The idea was that if people understood each other better and had a better understanding of how communication differs, it could prevent another world war. But to be as fair and objective as possible, the second part is more hearsay, as I couldn't find documentation of either creators directly quoting this. So take that second part with a grain of salt unless someone links it in the comment section below. Neither of the two creators had an educational background in psychology, but developed the test out of their own personal curiosity about understanding the human psyche. Catherine Briggs' inspiration arose after meeting her future son-in-law and questioning why they both saw the world so differently. She had her own mental model of people at that time and was later inspired to document her ideas after reading the book Psychological Types in 1923, written by Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung. Hence, the creation of the first version of the MBTI system. But in order to fully understand MBTI, we have to take a quick detour further in the past to learn about Carl Jung, as his research has been pivotal to every evolution and iteration of the Myers-Briggs test. In layman's terms, Carl Jung is the grandfather of MBTI. Before we begin this next section, I want everyone to know that I'm trying my best to pronounce everyone's name correctly, but they're not English names, so I'm gonna mess up. The late great Carl Jung was a Swiss psychiatrist born in 1875 and passed away in 1961. Aside from being the founder of the School of Analytical Psychology, he created psychological terms that we still use today, such as archetypes, the collective unconscious, introversion, extroversion, the anima, the persona, and the archetype of the self. Carl Jung wrote extensively about how he arrived to his conclusions. He wrote that as a child, he believed that he had two personalities. The first was that of a typical schoolboy living at that time. The second was of this dignified and authoritative man of the past. A self-proclaimed introvert, he would play by himself and even create his own version of totems, which brought him inner peace and security. He later discovered that similar totems have been created by tribes around the world and were not unique to him. Coincidences like this, among others, led him to question whether there's an unconscious programming or understanding of the world that exists beyond human senses, that there might be this intangible force that binds us all together, which eventually led to him studying philosophy. Dr. Jung was a fan of philosophers such as Immanuel Kant and Arthur Schopenhauer, as well as evolutionary scientists like Charles Darwin. He was also a close colleague and collaborator of Sigmund Freud, who is known for popularizing the idea of the unconscious mind. The research of all these individuals still influenced the way that we operate today. Immanuel Kant's philosophy influenced modern politics, emphasizing that politics should be guided by morality. Schopenhauer's concept of the human will posed that an invisible driving force motivates human behavior and desire. Darwin's theory of natural selection formed the foundation of modern-day evolutionary biology, and Freud is credited with developing what is known today as modern talk therapy, where a patient speaks to a therapist to uncover motives for their issues. We have to give credit where it's due, as Jung's theories were built off the shoulders of those before him, and that's why they're brought up in this video. In respect to Darwin's theory of evolution, Dr. Jung is quoted as saying, "We keep forgetting that we are primates and that we have to make allowances for those primitive layers in our psyche." To put it simple, Jung is saying that we often forget that we're part of the animal kingdom. Because of this, our minds are influenced by deep primal instincts that shape how we think and act. And those primal instincts need to be considered when discussing the human psyche. To quickly go over Dr. Jung's achievement, he was the founder of the School of Analytical Psychology, which emphasizes concepts such as the existence of the collective unconscious, not a physical location, but a deduction based on ubiquity or archetypes across time and space. The importance of archetypes and the role of the ego in balancing unconscious and conscious activities. The TLDR is that the goal of analytical psychology is to help people develop a balanced personality by integrating and transcending opposites within their psyche. Jung's approach was a modification of Freud's psychoanalysis. The primary difference between Jung and Freud's model is that Freud's work primarily focused on repressed childhood experiences and the impact of sexuality on behavior, whereas Jung's model emphasizes a broader concept of the collective unconscious, incorporating universal archetypes and spirituality beyond just sexuality and past experience. To explain the difference as simple as possible, and keep in mind this is a very simplified comparison, Freud saw the unconscious as primarily driven by someone's past and sexual desires, and Jung saw the unconscious as a deeper layer containing universal symbols and themes that influence our behavior. Carl Jung is pivotal to understanding the Myers-Briggs system because he popularized the idea of cognitive functions. And this is where grandfather Jung meets his successors in the Briggs-Myers family. This is when we start talking about the psychological foundation of MBTI. This is where we start talking about cognitive functions. As mentioned earlier in the video, the 4-letter result a person receives after taking the personality test is the tip of the iceberg, since its only function is to form a person of their cognitive function ordering in their cognitive function stack. This is where the MBTI system goes from just being a fun personality test to its root in psychology. Cognitive function refers to the mental process involved in acquiring, processing, and using knowledge. Understanding cognitive function is vital to comprehending the MBTI system because these functions form the psychological foundation of the system and explain how individuals acquire, process, and interpret information differently. For example, cognitive functions explain why two people can watch the same movie and have completely different interpretations. It's about the order and method through which people process information internally that makes us inherently similar or different. Modern MBTI theory suggests that each personality type has a unique cognitive function stack. This stack consists of 8 cognitive functions divided into 2 groups of 4. The primary function, which are the top 4 cognitive functions, are consciously used throughout the lifespan of a human life. And the shadow functions, which are the bottom 4 cognitive functions, they operate unconsciously, unknowingly influencing our decision and behavior. The MBTI community believes that by understanding these functions, individuals can gain better insight into our own behavior and improving them. Additionally, understanding how others process information can facilitate clear communication by helping people present ideas in a way others can easily grasp. To summarize this video so far, MBTI is a system of 4 letters that identify one of 16 personality types, which reflects how a person processes information based on their cognitive function stack. We're good so far? Because it goes deeper. Carl Jung introduced the concept of cognitive function in his 1921 book, Psychological Types. His ideas stem from observing that people process information and interact with the world in fundamentally different ways, which he attributed to a hierarchy of mental functions rather than just external influences. He identified 4 functions that people use to make cognitive decisions and categorized them into 4 terms: thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition. If you've been paying attention to this video, these are the same 4 terms that describes your results after receiving results from your MBTI test. But before diving deeper, I want to clarify that these 4 terms don't inherently matter. The word thinking, for instance, can be replaced by any word in the English dictionary, and the concept it describes still remains true. It's the concept behind a word that's the key, not the word itself. Similar to how different languages have a different word for the animal of a cat, whether we call it gata, a neko, or a cat, the animal remains the same. Carl Jung also believed that each cognitive function has an attitude, which he expressed as either introverted or extroverted. Introverted means directed inward towards internal thoughts and reflections, while extroverted means directed outward towards the external world and interactions. This is completely different from the modern understanding that introverts recharge alone and extroverts recharge around other people. So if you're one of those people and that's how you understand the difference, remove that from your memory because that's not correct. Jung also noticed a third attitude commonly referred today as ambiversion, which he described as the most common of the 3 groups. He wrote that the normal man is influenced as much from within as from without. So while he categorized cognitive functions into 2 attitudes, he acknowledged that most people are influenced equally by both. This perspective may seem counterintuitive to modern MBTI, but I'll address that soon. The goal of analytical psychology is to help people develop a balanced personality by transcending the opposite within their psyche. To achieve this, certain principles must hold true. And this is where things get a bit complex, so I'll try to explain things as clear as possible. Jung believed that there are 8 cognitive functions, with certain functions paired as opposites. The cognitive function and its opposite pairing are as follows: introverted intuition and extroverted sensing, extroverted intuition and introverted sensing, introverted thinking and extroverted feeling, or extroverted thinking and introverted feeling. He theorized that a person has a primary cognitive function that they rely on, which means that the opposite function must be the least used. This creates a dichotomous nature of cognitive functions. Primary cognitive function is another way of saying that it's common sense for a specific archetype, in addition to referring to the first of the 4 cognitive functions in your primary cognitive function stack. And as a reminder, each person uses all 8 cognitive functions, but typically are only aware of the first 4 functions in their function stack. The dichotomous nature of cognitive function lies between intuition and sensing, or thinking and feeling. This is the easiest way I can explain the difference, but please feel free to comment below if you can explain the difference better than I can. The difference between intuition and sensing is whether you experience something through your senses or filling in the blanks using pre-existing knowledge. For example, you can't intuitively imagine a basketball in your hands if you physically see one there, because you're using your senses. While you can imagine the ball being different, your senses confirm the reality of the basketball in your hand. Conversely, imagining a basketball when it isn't physically present requires intuition, which relies on memory and past sensory experiences. To summarize, you can't sense something that isn't physically there, and you can't intuit something if your senses see it as it is. The difference between thinking and feeling is a lot more simple. A decision is made based either on logic or emotions. While logic can influence feelings and vice versa, you're not using both simultaneously. You're either guided by emotions or by the logical aspect of the situation devoid of emotions. You're using one or the other. Neither dichotomy is more superior to another, and all 4 functions have their strengths and weaknesses. Additionally, the opposite of the primary function must occupy the last position in the hierarchy to maintain balance. Don't forget, Dr. Jung's idea consistently emphasizes achieving balance. For example, if you're an INTJ with introverted intuition as your primary function, the opposite, extroverted sensing, must be your 4th function. The rule of dichotomies within cognitive function is essential to arrive to the 16 archetypes in the Myers-Briggs system, because without the rule of dichotomies, the potential combination of cognitive function will expand from 16 archetypes to over 40,000 archetypes, as the math will be 8 factorial. In addition to the first 4 functions, Jung discussed the remaining 4 functions, which he calls the shadow. Shadow functions are simply the opposite of the primary four functions with the opposite introverted or extroverted attitude. Jung described the shadow as a cognitive blind spot or an unconscious element of our nature made up of repressed ideas, instincts, weaknesses, and shortcomings. In simpler terms, Jung believed the following about shadow functions. The shadow function can be harmful if ignored or left unrecognized. Merging with the shadow is usually detrimental as it conflicts with one's nature and can overwhelm or limit potential. The shadow often causes us to project our emotions, dislikes, or insecurities onto others. And finally, if unrecognized, the shadow can control our lives without our awareness, and we would call it fate. Shadow work is a vital aspect of Jung's theory because it explains the unforeseen influences on our behavior. While it wasn't included in the first version of MBTI, modern-day MBTI system has integrated shadow work as it has evolved over time. Finally, to wrap up this section on Carl Jung, it's worth noting that his idea of cognitive function order differs from what is commonly accepted today. He believed that if a person's primary function is introverted or extroverted, the remaining three functions must be the alternate attitude to maintain balance. Using the INTJ as an example again, where the primary function is introverted intuition, Jung believed that the three remaining functions must be extroverted. But as of 2025, MBTI uses a different model known as the Grant model or Grant stack, developed by Dr. Harold Grant, which states that to be fully balanced, the cognitive function attitude must alternate. Introversion, then extroversion, or vice versa. For example, if the first function of an archetype is extroverted, then the second must be introverted, the third must be extroverted, and the fourth must be introverted. And the final thing to know about cognitive function is that cognitive functions are the reason for MBTI's global influence. Cognitive function is not limited to cultural biases and can easily be translated to another language and still maintain its validity. Similar to a cat being called a gata, a neko, or a cat, cognitive functions are still valid regardless of language, culture, or social economic status. The evolution of Jung's ideas over time reflects the dedication people had to studying and expanding upon his theories. This has given rise to different schools of thoughts that use cognitive function as a foundation as well, not just the MBTI system. In the next section, we're going to briefly cover these schools of thoughts. Although they diverge from MBTI in some ways, they all stem from Jung's legacy and contribute to its cultural and intellectual relevance. And these schools of thoughts are still close enough in cognitive function foundation that progress made in one school will directly affect progress in another school. So let's shift gears and talk about the cousins of the MBTI system. The first school of thought is popularly known as the Keirsey temperament sorter, created by David West Keirsey. David Keirsey, an American psychologist whose focus was on conflict management, introduced his temperament sorter in his book, Please Understand Me, published in 1978. After reading the Myers-Briggs type indicator, he recognized that the 16 archetypes reflected his own observation as a school psychologist and decided to expand and modify each type. The definition of temperament is described as a set of observable personality traits that influence how someone can interact with the world, including their communication style, preferred actions, values, and talents. Keirsey organized each of these four types into temperament similar to MBTI, describing them using observable behavior based on 5 different behavioral sciences: anthropology, biology, ethology, psychology, and sociology. Hence why the temperament model is more accepted than MBTI in the scientific community, and rightfully so. The primary difference between MBTI and Keirsey's temperament model is that MBTI emphasizes individual preferences and understanding how the individual thinks and feels, whereas Keirsey's temperament sorter emphasizes how the individual responds to the world and the preferred way of engaging with it. In a nutshell, MBTI explains why a person functions the way they do, and Keirsey explains how a person will engage with the world. Both systems are still based off of Carl Jung's idea of cognitive functions, and Keirsey's temperament model can be seen as complementary to the MBTI system rather than opposing it. Keirsey's temperament model is also widely popular and has influence in over 170 different countries. Many influential voices in the MBTI community has attributed their understanding of cognitive functions or their contribution to Keirsey and his teachings. The second school of thought with a large following is known as socionics. Socionics was created by, help me out Google,
Aušra Augustinavičiūtė.
in the 1970s and can be seen as analogous to the Myers-Briggs type indicator. Although both systems are based on Carl Jung's teaching of cognitive functions, they differ significantly in their theoretical foundation, approaches, and application. Whereas archetypes maintain the same name and cognitive function placements between MBTI and the Keirsey temperament model, socionic approaches these aspects differently. Socionics follows the same dichotomous rule of cognitive functions, but organizes functions differently into an 8-function model known as Model A. Socionics focuses on the term called information metabolism, which Google defines as how organisms process information and exchange signals with their environment, because I can't find how Socionics explains it. Without going into too much details, because there are many differences between both systems, the primary difference between both Socionics and MBTI is that MBTI primarily focuses on individual preferences and career guidance, whereas Socionics is more relationship-oriented and emphasizes system interaction and compatibility. The simplified version is that MBTI is more focused on the self, whereas Socionics is more focused on the self in addition to someone or something else. Even with the difference, you can still use either model to achieve both focuses with enough time and effort. Although some teachings from both systems may overlap, the fundamental difference in focus makes the two systems more different than they're similar. Additionally, MBTI is known to be more accessible and easier to understand, whereas Socionics is seen as more complex with a steeper learning curve. Neither model is inherently better, and both can be used for self-improvement. The final school of thought is called the Objective Personality System, or OPS, created by Dave and Shannon Powers. I couldn't find information on when objective personality was created, but the system is still active as of today. Because the system is so new and still being refined, there isn't much to say about it as new discoveries are continuously being made. The theories that are popular today in the OPS system can change by the time this video is released, so I'm not going to go to too much details, and it's also a little difficult to find details. The similarities between the objective personality system and the Myers-Briggs system are that they both derive from Carl Jung's cognitive function models. But OPS has over 512 different types compared to the 16 archetypes of MBTI. The objective personality system also engages its community in a more modern fashion, creating outreach through social media platforms such as YouTube, and also offering weekly lessons and engagement. Due to the newness of this school, only time will tell how its discoveries will improve our understanding of MBTI or cognitive functions. Now that we briefly went over the different school of thoughts, let's get back to the original topic at hand and discuss how MBTI has evolved over time. As mentioned earlier in the video, the MBTI test has gone through a few revisions, and the modern day test is a different version from the original created. It is unclear which version the test is currently on, as there are conflicting sources, some stating that it's a 7th version and others claiming a later iteration. But for the sake of this video, let's discuss what I found to be consistent and what most sources agree upon. The first version of MBTI was created in 1944 and was originally named the Briggs-Myers Type Indicator Handbook. The test was then republished in 1956 under the name Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, with some sources stating that the change was made to avoid confusion with the acronym BMTI, which at that time, they could have mistaken it as referring to bowel movements. Around the same time, the MBTI test caught the attention of the Educational Testing Service, ETS, a private assessment organization, which led to the publication of the first MBTI manual in 1962. The manual was a comprehensive guide explaining the theory behind MBTI rather than just the test itself. Many updates have been made to the manual and the test since then, and again, it's unclear which version we're on. Around the same time the MBTI manual was published, a professor by the name of Harold Grant took a liking to the typing system. And if you've been paying attention, Professor Grant is the person who proposed the cognitive function typing order that is popularized today. Instead of Jung's cognitive function stacking order, where the primary function is the opposite attitude of the following 3 functions, Professor Grant concluded that each cognitive function attitude must be the opposite of the one before. The Grant model is what modern-day MBTI adheres to. Up until this point in this video, we have already established a few key figures in the evolution of the MBTI system. We talked about Catherine Cook Briggs and Isabel Myers, the mother-daughter duo who created the MBTI typing system. We discussed Professor Carl Jung, who coined the concept of cognitive functions, the foundation which MBTI is based. We also covered different iterations of MBTI, including the introduction of the Grant Cognitive Function Stack model and the publication of the first MBTI manual when the mother-daughter pair worked with the Educational Testing Service. Now, let's discuss a few key figures that had or is currently having a significant influence on our current understanding of MBTI, some of whom have no direct affiliation with the system itself, but aligns more with Jungian theory, rather than being an MBTI purist. Regardless of their affiliation, their research has profoundly influenced the MBTI community to the extent that modern-day MBTI has been synonymous with their contributions. Distinguishing whether a theory stems from MBTI or Jungian psychology can be challenging due to the simulation of information. For simplicity, this video will highlight figures whose research has been adopted into modern-day MBTI, regardless of their original focus. The first notable modern figure is American psychiatrist Dr. John Beebe. Dr. Beebe is credited with popularizing the 8-function model of cognitive functions. Whereas MBTI traditionally focused on the top 4 cognitive function, also known as the primary function, the 8-function model examines all 8 cognitive functions, assigning each an archetypal role. This model highlights that even the bottom 4 functions, commonly known as the shadow functions, influence our psyche. Dr. Beebe's model integrates these shadow functions into the framework, describing the roles in unconscious or stress-driven behaviors. His findings are supplementary to MBTI, offering additional insight into personal growth and interpersonal relationships beyond MBTI's focus on career orientation and practical application. The second notable figure is Dr. Linda Barron, who aligned MBTI's personality type with David Keirsey's temperament theory. Her work bridged the gap between cognitive function theory and observable behavior patterns, making both systems more accessible. She developed the concept of interaction styles, which group personality types based on their communication and energy management preferences. This framework emphasizes how people interact and adapt in social and work contexts. Dr. Barons is widely recognized for popularizing MBTI in organizational and educational environments and can be seen as one of the most influential person within the community within our lifetime. The final notable figure is Dr. Dario Nardi, who conducts neuroscience research on cognitive function using EEG scans to study how different MBTI types exhibit different brain activity patterns. His studies help bridge the gap between MBTI as pseudoscience and modern-day psychology by providing empirical evidence for its neurological basis. Dr. Nardi's research reveals how individuals' brain dynamically shift between cognitive functions depending on the task or the context, demonstrating the real-time application of MBTI type dynamics. His research can be the foundation that opens the door for MBTI's acceptance in the psychological and science community. Continuous progress is being made in understanding MBTI not only in the realm of academia, but also by enthusiasts building communities and promoting education through social media platforms. These individuals and groups provide valuable avenues for newcomers to learn about the MBTI typing system and by expressing its teaching in an accessible way to modern-day audience. The most notable organization is the Myers-Briggs Foundation. The foundation actively promotes research and education related to psychological type theory, aiming to expand understanding and application across various fields. On an independent level, Personality Hacker is a popular platform providing insights and tools for personal growth using personality typology, particularly in MBTI. Co-founded by Joe Mark-Witt and Antonio Dodge, experts in personality typology and human development, the platform stands out for its engaging content, including podcasts, courses, and books. Personality Hackers provide accessible explanation of cognitive functions, practical advice on relationships and career growth, and fosters a strong community of typology enthusiasts. Personality Hacker is still active today, and I recommend looking them up. Finally, we can't forget content creators. Across platforms like Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok, you can find creators dedicated to the Myers-Briggs system. One popular content creator is Frank James, who's gained over 1 million subscribers on YouTube with his unique approach to MBTI through engaging videos. Frank James uses comedy and relatable scenarios to depict the quirks of each MBTI personality through storytelling, sketches, and even role-playing. His skits are funny, and it makes personality typing both entertaining and accessible, reaching beyond the typology community. If you made it to this final part of this video, congratulations, it's been a doozy. There are many topics that I could have added to this video, such as how the MBTI test compares to other typing methods more accepted in the psychological community, like the Big Five or the DISC assessment, or even other typing systems considered pseudoscience like Enneagram or astrology. I could have easily created a section to respond to MBTI critics or talk about how big the typing system is in cultures such as South Korea, where they're making songs about it. But I consciously decided to leave these topics out because they don't fit the essence of this video. This video was created to educate anyone curious about the MBTI system and provide insights into why it's a system that has stood and will continue to stand the test of time. I also want to show my appreciation to people I've never met that has such a huge impact on my life by our shared interests of either Jungian theory or the MBTI system itself. To every person that I mentioned in this video, thank you for continuing to promote and advance our shared interests of a common community and the promotion of continuous self-growth. Thank you for helping me understand myself. And for those of you who made it to this part of this video, I hope you all learned something new and that this video helped clarify a few things. You don't have to like or subscribe to my channel. Honestly, I don't even know where I'm taking this channel from this point out. But do me a favor and please continue to learn more about yourself and learn how to better foster a community with other people. That's all I have to say for this video. I really do appreciate all of you for sticking to this video for as long as you have. Thank you very much. Bye. And this is the portion of the video where I'm just going to speak freely off the dome. For those of you who are new to my channel, I do believe in the Myers-Briggs typing system, and as you can see in the background, I'm actually in class for psychology. I thought that the more I learned about psychology, the less I would accept the MBTI system, or specifically cognitive function theory. But the more I learn about psychology, the more I see its validity in its teaching. It's very counterintuitive because if you're in the scientific community, if you're in the psychological community, the research method is law. But then there's the other side of me. I am an INTJ, so my NI is like, no, dude, there's something else going on that we're unaware of. There has to be something out there that binds us all together and makes us understand a certain way, or just engage with the world, or react or engage with people a specific way. Like learning about abnormal psychology and understanding that Freudian psychoanalysis has now been debunked doesn't make sense to me when they say that. Because psychoanalysis and Carl Jung, both of them, Freud and Jung, work together, is what modern day AA is based off of. So to say that it's been debunked, but still using that process that's been created by their understanding, doesn't make sense to me. It's like, how can you say cars aren't real if we're still using the engine and models to build other cars or trains and stuff? At least that's the way I'm looking at it. If you're a fan of my channel, if you've been wondering where I've been, I'm back in school. I'm trying to be the best version of myself that I can be, and I'm trying to have more of an impact in the psychological community. And if you're a university professor, please hit me up if you like my content. I hope this video is a good introduction to who I am as a person and the depth of research that I do. Anyways, that's enough plug for myself. Thank you, everyone. I hope you have a great day. Today is Lunar New Year, so for those of you who celebrate Lunar New Year's, Happy New Year's to you guys, and everyone else out there, have a great day. Bye, everyone.